So, it wasn't that long ago that I finally worked up the courage to play Resident Evil for the first time. The first remake, to be exact. And I didn't expect that one trip through the Spencer Mansion would completely pull me into the world of survival horror. After my first brush with Umbrella's monsters and conspiracies, I went from being a curious tourist to someone who genuinely fell in love with the genre. I started appreciating the way survival horror forces you to slow down and play deliberately, managing limited resources and paying close attention to your surroundings. I loved how every document and small environmental detail mattered, not just for solving puzzles, but for building a compelling sense of atmosphere and lore. And once that clicked, it was hard for me to stop. With so many exciting titles out there, both upcoming and already a release, especially in the indie scene, I've been eager to try as many as I can to make up for lost time. So, in this video, I want to talk about 3 upcoming indie survival horror games whose demos really stood out to me, and that I think are absolutely worth keeping an eye on. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. The first demo I want to talk about is Jungle Rot. At first glance, what immediately caught my attention is the setting. Instead of a sprawling mansion, a police station, or a foggy town, Jungle Rot throws you straight into the jungles of Vietnam during the Vietnam War. You play as this guy, Sergeant John Crackhorn, a US soldier stranded after his helicopter gets shot down by an RPG.
Taking in the scenery, Sergeant? You're not a very talkative one, are you? Mayday! We're going down! Brace for impact!
But the crash isn't the worst part. According to the game's lore, the US military had been developing an experimental toxin to help turn the tide of the war. Unfortunately, the helicopter carrying that toxin goes down, contaminating the surrounding area. Your story begins 1 week after the crash, when the consequences of that contamination have already taken root. The whole premise honestly reminded me of 68, the comic series about a zombie outbreak during the Vietnam War, though as far as I know, there's no official confirmation that Jungle Rot draws direct inspiration from it. Still, it's a rare and refreshing backdrop for survival horror, don't you think? Gameplay-wise, Jungle Rot clearly wears its early Resident Evil influence on its sleeve. You have the opening FMV, fixed camera angles, deliberate pacing, the door opening animations, zombie-like enemies. It's very much rooted in that classic formula, and for the most part, it works. One thing I immediately noticed though, is that the demo doesn't impose a hard inventory limit. You can carry as many healing items, weapons, and ammo as you want. On one hand, that's convenient for a demo, but on the other, unlimited inventory does take away some of the classic survival horror tension. When you don't have to choose what to pick and what to leave behind, that layer of anxiety starts to fade. I'm curious to see whether the final version will rebalance that. Oh, and I have to give a spotlight to the enemy design. Some enemies, unless you put them down with headshots, don't just stay dead. Their heads detach almost immediately and sprout spider-like legs, crawling towards you aggressively. Reminds me of those pesky head crabs from Half-Life. Unlike Crimson Heads in the Resident Evil remake, this don't wait around. They transform instantly. And because they're just moving heads, the target area is much smaller, which makes dealing with them surprisingly tense. It's chaotic, and it keeps you from ever feeling fully safe after a fight. Later in the demo, the game escalates things further with bomber-type enemies that rush you the moment they spot you. That sudden burst of aggression adds another layer of unpredictability. As for weapons, you start with a handgun and a machete, and honestly, the machete feels about as useful as the knives in early RE titles. It's not something you'll rely on in most encounters, though it does have a practical use for box breaking and against the detached spider heads, so I suppose it's not entirely pointless. The puzzles in the demo aren't particularly taxing, but they fit the pacing. One has you placing ice into a statue to stop poisonous gas from filling a room, and another requires finding a lighter to burn through an oil-soaked barrier. They're pretty straightforward, more about maintaining momentum than stumping the player with difficult brain teasers. Exploration, however, can be disorienting. I have to dock a point for this one, because there's no map in the demo whatsoever, and when I entered the underground Vietnamese bunker, I got lost more than once. Maybe it's just my skill issue, but depending on your perspective, that either adds to the tension or becomes a bit bit frustrating without stronger environmental guidance or landmarks. Presentation-wise, the jungle and bunker environments are visually interesting and suit survival horror surprisingly well. The uniforms and weapons appear authentic to the time period, well, at least from a non-military expert perspective like mine, which helps sell the setting. The animations are admittedly stiff, but they feel consistent with the game's clear homage to PS1 era survival horror. I chalk it up to a stylistic choice rather than an outright distraction. Sound design is serviceable, gunshots sound decent, ambient audio does its job, and the dialogue is appropriately cheesy for the genre. One thing I did notice though is the lack of subtitles during cutscenes, which might be an issue for some players. There are also some neat secrets hidden in the demo. You can find a wearable soldier helmet and a cigar that both act as health buffs, unlock alternate costumes by backtracking to certain areas, and even shoot directly at the camera in specific angles. Just a fun little nod to Resident Evil 2 and 3. Overall, Jungle Rock feels like a love letter to classic survival horror, but with a unique historical twist. The Vietnam War setting, the toxin outbreak premise, and especially those spider-like detached heads give it a distinct identity. It's rough in places, sure, but it's definitely one I'm keeping an eye on. Moving on to the second demo, it's Phase Zero. Instead of the war-torn Vietnam jungle, imagine a small American town buried in snow. The game takes place in the small town of Flintbeak in 1994 during a heavy blizzard. You play as a mysterious man, apparently named Guy if the hospital records near your bed are to be believed, who wakes up from a coma inside a hospital only to find it completely overrun by zombies. It's a setup that clearly nods to stories like 28 Days Later or the opening of The Walking Dead. Waking up alone in a medical facility while the world around you has already collapsed. Out of desperation, you escape your room through an open window and begin descending through the hospital in search of a way out. I dig the atmosphere right away. The combination of an abandoned hospital, heavy snowfall outside, and these strange organic growths spreading through the building creates a deeply absorbing mood. Sometimes there's barely any music at all, just the ambient hum of hospital machinery, the echo of empty corridors, and the sound of your bare feet slapping against the cold floor. When you're near a window looking outside, you can hear the blizzard and the wind howling. And when you're surrounded, a specific track kicks in to heighten the tension. It's very deliberate and very effective. Mechanically, Phase Zero feels closer to the modern Resident Evil remakes in terms of menu design. Minimalist and functional, but still embraces that classic survival horror structure. You can choose between tank controls or modern controls, just like in Jungle Rock, and both feel surprisingly good. There's auto-aim as well, which helps in tight spaces. However, unlike some other survival horror games, there's no melee option here. Once you're out of ammo, you're truly vulnerable. And speaking of ammo, the first weapon you get is a shotgun, which is interesting. Traditionally, survival horror games start you off with a handgun. Giving you a shotgun right away feels almost like overkill, but the game balances this well. Shotgun shells are scarce, and the ammo economy feels just right. It reminds me a bit of Resident Evil 4, where you almost always have just enough to survive, but never enough to feel comfortable. The zombies themselves react satisfyingly to your shotgun blasts. Most get knocked back, some lose their heads entirely, and their animations are nicely done, especially the way they shamble forward and stagger when hit. They're slow, but dangerous if you let them get too close, since they'll grab you on contact. There's even a segment where you're forced to deal with multiple zombies at once, which makes positioning and shot placement crucial. You really have to maximize each shell. In terms of survival mechanics, the inventory system is one of my favorite parts of the demo. You start with only 4 slots, which makes sense because, hey, you're literally just waking up wearing a hospital gown, and later, after changing clothes, you gain 2 additional slots. It's such a small detail, but it feels completely diegetic and grounded. Unlike Jungle Rock's unlimited inventory, Phase Zero leans hard into resource limitation, and that tension works in its favor. And the good news is, the key items don't occupy the same slot as your weapons and health items, so Yeah, that's pretty neat. The puzzles are also a highlight. The game cleverly integrates medical equipment into its puzzle design. There's one where you calibrate an X-ray machine to reveal a hidden key item, and another where you toggle an MRI machine on and off to retrieve specific objects. They feel naturally embedded in the hospital setting, rather than being just arbitrary brain teasers, which makes solving them more satisfying. There are also small environmental interactions like moving gurneys that block your path, which helps the hospital feel tangible and physical as a location. One quality of life feature I appreciate is the subtle on-screen indicators showing which doors and objects are interactable. It guides exploration without feeling like the game's holding your hand, especially in games using pre-rendered backgrounds like this. Narratively, the demo hints at something deeper going on. Notes scattered throughout the hospital mention a mysterious cure being tested on patients. At one point, you even encounter husks of bodies, completely hollowed out, as if something consumed them from the inside. It's pretty disturbing, not gonna lie, and it suggests that this outbreak might be more than just a typical zombie infection. And then there's the ending. The demo cuts right as you finally escape the hospital. The camera pulls further and further back, revealing the scale of the outbreak spreading through Flint Peak. Snow blankets everything. The wind roars, and you look incredibly small and alone amidst the undead. I'm telling you, it's a perfect cliffhanger right there. Overall, Phase Zero feels incredibly focused with its tight inventory, meaningful puzzles, strong atmosphere, and deliberate pacing. Out of the 3 demos, I'd say this one might be the most cohesive experience so far. It offers just the right amount of gameplay and intrigue to get you interested. I'm sure going to keep an eye out for this one, since the dev plans to release it sometime this year. The third and final demo I tried is Ground Zero, and in terms of scope, this one feels the most ambitious. The demo begins 2 months after a devastating meteor impact wiped out South Korea. You play as So-Yun, an elite South Korean operative dispatched to Busan alongside a Canadian partner to investigate what's left of the disaster zone. The premise immediately reminded me of the original Dino Crisis. No, not because the dinosaurs, of course, but because of the same vibe. Highly trained operatives entering an unknown catastrophe site with limited information. It feels tactical and mission-driven right from the start. And unlike the previous demos, this one feels expansive. You explore a variety of locations during a rainy night: an abandoned amusement park, shoreline towns, stranded research ship, a museum, a subway station, and even an arcade. The environments are genuinely impressive and really sell the idea of a once lively city now wrecked and overtaken by mutated growths. Those mutations appear to be linked to the meteor, though the demo doesn't fully explain what exactly came with it. Well, whatever it is, it's transforming organisms into hostile monstrosities.
움직이지 마세요. 제가 도와드리러 왔습니다. 다치셨습니까? 저 종양은 저건... 물러서세요. 경고합니다. 제 말 들립니까? 저는 치명적인 무력을 사용할 권한이 있습니다. 사용하게 만들지 마세요. 저는 도우려는 겁니다.
In the demo, you mainly encounter mutated humans and infected dogs. The dogs are noticeably more aggressive and faster in their attacks, but they take fewer shots to bring down compared to the human enemies. The human mutants are more durable and dangerous in groups. And combat is clearly where Ground Zero differentiates itself. There's full tutorial mode, which I appreciated. It teaches you traversal, climbing ladders, vaulting over obstacles, how to aim using a red laser sight reminiscent of the original Resident Evil 4, how to land critical shots, and even how to use melee combat with your modular combat knife. You can swipe, parry, and dodge incoming attacks. The animations are fluid and the system feels responsive. I dare say this is much more combat forward than the other 2 demos. You start with access to 3 firearms: a handgun, a shotgun, and an assault rifle. Each has clear strengths and trade-offs. They all feel satisfying to use, but the game adds an interesting twist. The points you can earn from defeating enemies depend on how you kill them. The more destructive the weapon, the fewer points you receive. If you want maximum points, you're encouraged to kill the enemies with your knife, which is significantly riskier. If you mistime a parry or get surrounded, things can go south very quickly. It creates a subtle risk versus reward layer that rewards skillful aggressive play. And just like Dino Crisis 2, you can exchange those points at computer terminals for items. It adds a life progression system on top of the survival horror structure. Inventory management still matters here. Slots are limited, and you can discard items if you want to pick up something else. Unlike Jungle Rot and Phase Zero though, you have access to RE-style item boxes where you can store items for future use. There's also a clever twist with these item boxes, or saves as they're referred to in-game. The first time you encounter one, you can either crack the combination by solving math problems, or blow it open using an explosive. But if you use the explosive method, you risk destroying a bonus random item stored inside. I love that kind of player choice. It makes even a small mechanic feel strategic. Healing works differently here too. Instead of just using herbs or medkits from the menu, you collect colored serums that resemble Resident Evil's herb system. You load the serum into a syringe and inject it in real time. At first, it forces you to think about the timing. Healing mid-combat becomes a tactical decision rather than a menu shortcut. At the start of the demo, you can also choose between two routes, a shorter path filled with more enemies, or a longer route focused more on puzzles. That choice alone adds replay value and encourages experimentation. You can also choose your difficulty at the beginning, easy, normal, or hard, which is always a welcome option for different playstyles. In terms of presentation, I really appreciated that characters speak in their respective native languages with subtitles available. It adds authenticity to the world building. Technically, the demo feels polished overall. I didn't encounter any game-breaking bugs, and the only issue I noticed was occasionally inconsistency in audio mixing, particularly during radio communications, where the voice filter effect wasn't always consistent. It's minor, but noticeable.
I guess I'm taking the long way around then. I'll cut through the coastal highway on the way back from the lighthouse and meet you at the entrance to Changnim Station.
Got it. Hey, my guys are saying they can run supply trains through the tunnels if you override the controls. That would come in handy.
Do you reckon those trains are safe to ride on? They could really help us get around the city quickly.
Definitely not. No way. If that train falls into the center of the fucking earth, I'd rather you weren't on it.
Overall, Ground Zero feels ambitious. It blends traditional survival horror tension with more action-oriented combat depth. It's bigger in scale and denser in mechanics than the other two demos. Whether it can balance all those elements in the final release remains to be seen. But based on this demo, it's aiming high, and I'm all in for the ride. Well, after trying all three demos, what excites me the most isn't just that they're survival horror, it's how differently each one approaches the genre. Jungle Rot leans into classic Resident Evil DNA, but drops it into the rarely explored backdrop of the Vietnam War with some genuinely creative enemy ideas. Phase Zero feels like a focused love letter to traditional survival horror, tight inventory, strong atmosphere, and smart environmental puzzles that really make the hospital setting stand out. And Ground Zero goes bigger and more ambitious, blending survival horror tension with deeper combat system and large-scale exploration in a post-catastrophe South Korea. They all feel distinct. They all understand the genre in different ways, and honestly, that's what makes the indie scene so exciting right now. If you are a survival horror fan like me, or maybe you're just starting to get into the genre as I did not long ago, these are definitely titles worth keeping an eye on. Let me know in the comments which one caught your attention the most, and if there are other upcoming survival horror games I should try, feel free to recommend them. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel out, and consider subscribing for more discussions, reviews, and deep dives into other games. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.